I want to thank all of you for coming today. This is a pretty good group. So we always want to welcome friends to Peter and Paul and have an opportunity to share the beauty of this church with everybody that visits. The church has been destroyed many times. The last time was in 1922 that there was an arsonist who set fire and totally destroyed the church. And it was rededicated in 1927. It was rebuilt. There was big controversy. There were only, I've forgotten how many families, only like 300 or 400 families. It was a very small church at that time. And there was talk about building this huge church, and the parishioners weren't real happy about having to spend all that money. But I think it was Father Schulte at the time personally sent everybody a letter and got them to agree. And as they were doing it, then the architect came back and he had a new way of designing the church so that there wouldn't be any side pillars. If you go into a lot of churches like Holy Name Cathedral or anything like that, they have all these columns down the side and it can interrupt the sight of vision. Architect went to the parish council and said, if you spend, and I've forgotten how much more, but it was a couple $100,000 more in the 1920s. Think about that. That was a lot of money. And they agreed to it. And that's why we have this beautiful open space today. We don't have these obstructions. And I don't know what the details of the architectural structure is, but it enabled us to have this big open space. And we see close to 1,000 people, which, if you've been here at Christmas or Easter, you know that even that's not enough for most of the things. But generally, it is enough space for us. The church is laid out in a cruciform shape. This is very traditional. You have the long central aisle with the apes up here, and then you have the cross arms here. Okay? It's laid out west to east. The east represents the sun, which is the light of God coming up. The west represents darkness and ignorance. So just by coming into the church, you come out of the darkness into the light, which I think is just a great symbol to start with, just by entering church. The north also represented in the early church where the barbarians came down and they kept harassing the church, basically. So you'll find that the pulpit is placed at the north end of the altar, which represents bringing the word of God to the barbarians. So there's a lot of tradition that goes on here and symbolism. You'll see that we have a lot of numerology. You'll hear the number 3 and the number 7 a lot of times. So we'll explain all that. Now, as you look around, you see these pillars, okay, with the gold leaves up on top. Those are stylized acanthus leaves. They're a symbol of Eden, okay? In Solomon's temple, this area, the nave, was all dedicated to decorations from the Garden of Eden. So we have continued that tradition also. You're hopefully sort of sitting in the Garden of Eden. We can't quite achieve it these days, but that's it. Now, when I was doing my research for the windows and for other decorations, I came across what I thought was a delightful story about stained glass windows. This was back many years ago, a couple centuries ago. And there was a rich student who was taken around by his tutor, and they'd taken around to all these different churches to see the beautiful windows. When he got done, the tutor asked the student, he said, "Do you know what a saint is?" And the boy replied, "Someone who the light shines through." And so I hope today, after we get through with this talk, that there will be new light that shines through for you. Okay? We're going to begin with the 6 windows here in the nave. These all have to do with Christ's light on earth. Now, we're going to start with the windows over here. You're free to move over there and take a look. Okay, this first window is obviously the Annunciation. The angel Gabriel, whose name means God is my strength, came down and visited Mary. And Mary, by tradition, was seen kneeling, and tradition has it that she was reading the Book of Wisdom and was in a garden. The dove above her represents the Holy Spirit descending upon her. What you might miss is underneath Gabriel, and just to the left of Mary, is a lily that's blooming. This is a lily candidum, also known as the Madonna lily. And it's a symbol of Mary's chastity and purity. We'll see the lily appear several times throughout. Now, she's in an enclosed garden, which is another symbol of her virginity and her immaculate conception. There are roses growing in the back, which are a symbol of her purity. Mary is often described as a rose without thorns. It is said that roses didn't have thorns when they were originally in the Garden of Eden, but when we were driven out of the Garden of Eden, they developed thorns. Their scent reminds us of the wonders of Eden. Their thorns remind us of our sins and what keeps us out of Eden. There are ferns growing also in the back there. Ferns are a symbol of humility and frankness. They have said they are only seen by an honest searcher. Mary's blue dress is a symbol of her humanity, and on the white gown, or white robe that she has, they're hard to see, but they are, again, acanthus leaves, a symbol of the Garden of Eden again. They might also, because it's hard to tell, they could also be grape leaves, which would be a symbol of the Eucharist, okay? Because this window presages a lot of what we're going to see on the other side. You see, a lot of the angels have musical instruments. This represents singing praises to God, and the angel there that has up at the top has a whole bunch of roses, both of them up there, again, symbol of Mary. Often when there have been apparitions of Mary or people have felt the presence of Mary, they have had the scent of roses accompany that. And that's why the rose is also a symbol of Mary. Roses represent heavenly joy. The angels some of the angels have laurels around their head. The laurel leaf represents triumph and victory. Pearls represent salvation. And there are 7 angels in this picture, and I mentioned that we'll be hearing the number 7 and the number 3 a lot. 7 represents completion and perfection. Okay? The world was created in 7 days. There are 7 days leading up to the altar. There are 7 steps to becoming a priest. You'll find that all the windows have an angel above them. And for the most part, we'll see one exception. For the most part, there's a different angel in each one of those. So I think it just represents, the heavenly presence of whatever's going on here. You have to appreciate how much the stained glass makers had to know their Bible and know, what all these things meant. These windows were created in the 1920s. Most of them, there were a couple exceptions, in Innsbruck, Austria. This was a very German community, German Catholic community back in the 20s. And so they wanted a church that reminded them of home. Okay, so that's why we have this very traditional church. All right, we'll move on to the next window. I sometimes think the talk should be called If Walls Could Talk, because while they don't talk aloud to us, if you get a chance, they talk to us a great deal about our faith and our religion. This obviously is, the Nativity. Pretty traditional, but what some people question, why is that a 6-pointed star? I always thought the Star of Bethlehem was 5-pointed, because that's our traditional thinking of stars. It has 6 points because it's actually 2 triangles put together. And the triangle is a symbol of the Trinity. So six is also the number of creation. So here you have, a double symbol of creation and the Trinity being here over the birth of Christ. Now, this actually is 2 events in one, in that the Magi and the shepherds are appearing in the same scene. In reality, according to the Bible, the Magi didn't appear till much later when Mary and Joseph had actually moved to a house. Okay, that's where they found them. The shepherds were pretty early on after the birth of Christ. The Magi are interesting in that it's very often that you get them representing youth, middle age, and old age. And that's another symbol of being Christ's message coming for everyone. Usually one of them is also shown with darker skin, as the central one over here is. That's another symbol of God's message coming for everyone. Now, we know that they brought, their three gifts. Melchior brought frankincense, which is a very expensive incense and represents Christ's priestly office. Gaspar brought gold, which represents Christ's kingly office, as well as the pure light of God. And Balthazar brought myrrh, which represents heavenly office, sorrow, and martyrdom. It was often used, myrrh, a rich spice, was often used to wrap the body of the dead in when they were being wrapped for burial. In John, it says that 100 pounds were used to wrap the body of Christ. But we know that symbolically, that 100 just simply meant a lot. It didn't necessarily mean a real 100 pounds worth. Christ's robe in this scene is red. You might have expected white, but again, this represents his future martyrdom. Again, now, next to Mary, and you have to look, she's almost looking down at it. Can you see the lily? We have another lily appearing with Mary, representing her chastity and her virgin birth. So this keeps occurring. The plane tree, or the tree in the back, just above the one Magi's head there, could be a plane tree, Plane, which represents the broad scope of Christ's message, or it could be an acacia, which represents immortality of the soul. There's a vine growing over on the left-hand side there. You know, I am the vine, you are the branches, Christ said. And above, we have an angel, and she's singing, praises to God up here. So it's hard to tell which of the Magi are which, because we can't really see what they're giving. But the one down lowest here may be Gaspar, because he's taken off his crown. Looks like he's presenting, gold to the king. And you see pearls down here at the bottom. Again, pearls are a symbol of salvation. And that's what Christ has come to do, is to, save us. Are the shepherds barefooted? Yes, I believe they are. Again, this represents, you have the Magi, who are very kingly, wise people. You have the shepherds, who basically represented the lowest in society. And so you have Christ coming for everybody, the lowest of us, as well as, up to the kingly office that we have. Why do some of the figures have halos and some of them don't? Okay. Well, obviously, Christ, Mary, and Joseph are going to have halos because it's a symbol of their divinity to a certain extent. I think it's just a special. I don't believe the Magi were made saints. Okay. They may have been, but that's usually a symbol of sainthood. It may just be a symbol of their special place in Christian history. Okay, but that's a good question. I don't know why they would have those other than for their special place. Okay, we'll move on to the next window. This is Christ found in the temple. If you remember the story, that it was the annual pilgrimage to Jerusalem for Passover, and Christ went with his family, and when they left after Passover, they thought Christ was with other family members as they were making their way back home. And then they realized that he wasn't with them. And they go back. He was missing for 3 days. Now, you can put a lot of interpretation on 3 again, but he spent 3 days in the tomb. He was sort of missing for 3 days after he was crucified. 3 also represents, the Trinity. So you have a double one here. Mary and Joseph obviously are back in the door. Mary looks pretty happy to have found him, if you can see the expression on her face. And they have the walking sticks, so you can see that they have been searching for him. There are the rabbis, okay? There are 8 rabbis. 8 represents man's regeneration. And so I think that's why there are 8 here. Or 7 of them are listening to him, questioning him, and one of them is writing down probably his answers. What it says, there's on this book that's on the floor down here, which is hard to read, but it says, all were astonished at his knowledge and his answers. So here he is obviously teaching in the synagogue at a very early young age. I don't know, probably 10 years old at this point or something. Now look at his halo, because we're starting to see this appearing. His halo is broken into 3 parts, just 3 little indentations. But you'll see this only on Christ. because it represents he is one of the Trinity. Okay, so that's why the halo is broken into 3 parts. And they were not always consistent in this, but you will see more of it as we go on. There is an angel up on top, and it says, "Glory in excelsis, glory to God in the highest." Yeah, it's hard to see some of this stuff without binoculars. I spent almost a year in here on random Saturdays with a pair of binoculars, looking, writing it down, then trying to find out what it meant. So, and I keep discovering things. Okay, the next window is going to be over here. This is Christ healing the sick and the lame. And I think this is just a general depiction of all the healing and cures that Christ did, okay? Because he did so many of them. Some of them were very casual in the sense that someone would just touch the fringe of his robe and be cured, things like this. So I think this is, a general depiction of all the healing that he did. And he's probably standing in front of a synagogue. And there are a wide variety of people and professions that are represented here. Over on the left in the red or the maroon, I think you see a scholar, which we can usually tell by the shape of the hat. And again, more medieval than biblical. He has a very blank look in his face. I'm quite sure he represents a blind person who is about to be healed. There is a priest or a cleric kneeling there in the rich green robes, and you can tell because he has a tonsured haircut. They used to cut their hair in the shape of the crown of thorns that Christ had at the crucifixion. Then you just have, a crippled man, a man laying down over on the side that's crippled, and a woman bringing her child, asking for help, probably a sick child. There were a lot of stories about that. Now, who's with him? Well, in the green right next to Christ is probably John. John was always depicted as being the youngest. He's also wearing green. Green represents youth and growth. The older figure is probably Peter. Peter was often shown as the oldest of the disciples. He's also shown wearing yellow, and yellow is a symbol of revealed truth. And we know that Christ revealed many things to Peter that were not written down. That's in the Bible, that he said many things and told them many things that were not revealed here. Now, if you look at Christ's halo, again, it's broken into 3 indentations, 3 parts, again, showing that he is one of the Trinity. In the back, you can see almost like a Roman forum over up high on the left, and there's like a stream of water or a road, you can't really tell, that's coming down. That could represent God as, the flowing water. Okay, we'll move on to the next window. This is Christ with the little children. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Christ says, "Let the children come unto me, and do not prevent them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs such as these." That's taken from Matthew, but in Mark and Luke, it's a very similar wording. I think what this represents is that we should have the simple, unquestioning faith that children have. When we're growing up, sometimes there are things that we just really, truly believe in, sometimes at special holiday times, and we don't question it at all. We just accept it. Our parents told us it was true, okay? So we believe it. And I think this is what the message here is. It's that Christ is telling us these things, and we shouldn't be questioning them more than, just trying to understand them. It's okay to question, but, you need to understand. And I think that, again, is why, it's let the children come unto me, because they're going to inherit. Now, the trees behind him, the green trees behind him, that are behind the other big tree, are probably cedars. Cedars represent long life and steadfastness in faith. You may have heard of the cedars of Lebanon, that they last forever, okay? So that's why those are there. The big tree, and possibly the one over on the left, could be oak, which represents steadfastness and faith, or again, it could be a plane tree, Plane, which we saw previously, which is Christ's far-reaching message. Now, the angel up above is the only duplicate, and it is a duplicate of the window in the previous window, except that it's reversed. I don't know whether they ran out of ideas for angels or what, but these are the only two that are alike. Again, you probably have Peter and John, but this time, they have different appearances and different. And this time, Peter is wearing green and John's wearing red, which John was martyred, which is a symbol of martyrdom. Peter, I'm not quite sure why he's wearing green at this point. Again, Christ's halo is broken into three parts. And when Christ is shown holding a child, it's often a symbol of him holding a soul, so that he's holding the souls of everyone who is in that picture. We'll move on to the next. All right, this is the resurrection. Now, of course, there is no biblical description of the resurrection, so this is an interpretation. When they got to the tomb, Christ wasn't there. So this is symbolically the resurrection. And Christ is standing on an altar, representing his sacrifice. The altar bears some similarities to our altar, in some of the shapes of the forms that are there. If you were here for Christmas, the big nativity scene that we had, around the top of it, we had the same repeated pattern that's at the top of this altar, because we were trying to tie everything together from the nativity all the way through to Christ's resurrection. The flag that Christ is carrying is Christ's banner, one of victory. You often saw this on sailing ships back on galleons and things like that, when they were also trying to claim lands in the name of God and the King. They would often have Christ's banner on there. Christ is always shown wearing white robes at the resurrection, a symbol of purity, victory, perfection. He has on his robe, again, leaves that could be either the acanthus leaves, which are a symbol of Eden or paradise, or they could possibly, again, be grape leaves, which represents the Eucharist, which is Christ. The kneeling angel may well be Uriel, whose name means God is my light, and was the one who guarded the tomb. And this angel is carrying a palm, which represents martyrdom and victory over death. You can see palms in the background also. Now, you can see Christ's wounds if you look very closely, and you see a soldier over here with this big banner sort of thing that has the SPQR, which was in Rome. They marched with this, and it meant for the government of people of Rome. So symbolically, Christ has conquered Rome, meaning he's conquered the world, so to speak. You have down here, on the lower right, the guard who is obviously very much afraid, probably one of the guards who was there when this happened, and the other guard over here also on the left. You have, again, probably cedars over on the left-hand side representing eternal and long-lasting life. Now, an interesting thing to note, and you don't always see it until you look for it, can you see that Christ is standing in an oval of light? Okay. It's called an areole or an areole, depending on how you pronounce it. We often see symbols of Mary or medals where Mary is in an oval and there are rays and everything like that. That's what this is. It represents an eternal reward added to eternal bliss in heaven for spiritual victory here on earth. It's a mouthful, but that's what it means, So that's why he is shown here. Now, the uppermost angel, again, has a gold crown and with a cross on it. She's holding a palm, again, a symbol of martyrdom, and she has her hand basically in the shape of a benediction down on this scene. So I think that's, the benediction coming from heaven down onto the resurrection. Now, something that you have to sort of look at on your own is that the windows play off of each other, Here you have the Annunciation, and Mary has that lily representing also the Easter resurrection, And you get Christ as a child, and then you get Christ with the little children. You get Christ teaching in the synagogue, and then you get Christ in front of a synagogue healing people. So if you look at these, there are a lot of ways of making these play off of each other, which I think is another interesting thing. It's very traditional in the nave to have the symbols of Christ's life here on earth. We'll see that in the apes here, they all have something to do with sacrifice. So there is a theme that goes on with these. This is the north transept, and this represents, the ascension of Christ into heaven. In Acts, it says, he was lifted up and a cloud took him from their sight. So you see he's surrounded by clouds, but he's also in this huge gold aureole. Gold, again, is a representation of the light of God. So he's being taken up. He's wearing a red robe representing his martyrdom. He's got purple, which represents his divinity to some extent, and he's got the white. The white robe has little crosses with a four-lobe design on it, and the cross obviously represents Christ, but then the four lobes could represent either the four corners of the earth, which represents, the universe, so to speak, or it could represent the four gospels, which are about to come. There are 8 angels in here. They represent man's rebirth and regeneration. Someone asked me why some of them are just a head and some of them are a full body and some of them are partial. I think this represents the whole choir of angels. There was a hierarchy to angels, and I think by having different representations, this represents all of heaven was celebrating Christ's ascension into heaven. Now, his halo here is a very elaborate 3-part halo. So we've almost seen a progression of it getting a little bit more elaborate each time. Down below him are the 12 apostles and Mary. This historically is incorrect in that there were only 11 apostles and Mary at the ascension. Matthias, the last disciple, was not chosen until after this event. But I think they're just trying to show that everybody was sort of together on this thing. Now you have to look closely. But the apostle, who I don't know which it is, who is closest to Mary, and he's looking down. If you look on the grass, you can see the outline of Christ's feet. But I think what this is showing us is that he was lifted directly up into heaven. So I think that's why those are there. Now, each of the apostles has a different elaborate halo. Other than Mary's, I don't think they represent anything specific, but Mary's halo has 12 stars in it, which comes from Revelation, and it also represents the whole world. 12 is the representation of completeness and everything, okay? That's why we have a dozen of something, because it represents a full amount. The uppermost window represents Christ the King. Again, it's a 3-part halo. His crown hides part of that. The symbol is the Alpha and the Omega from the Greek alphabet, representing the beginning and the end. I am the beginning, I am the end, he has said. In his right hand, he's holding up a chalice with the wafer in it, so representing the Eucharist. His other hand is supporting a cross, that symbol of his sacrifice. And he has a crown of thorns with a flaming heart in his center, representing his burning passion as well as his passion in terms of his suffering at the crucifixion. This one does have a dedication down at the bottom. It was a gift of Mr. and Mrs. David Callender family. Okay, they were members of the parish for many, many years. I understand the family is no longer in Naperville. People had to raise money to donate these things, and for all I know, there may have been dedications on some of these other windows that never got installed. Directly underneath, on both sides, you'll see that we have the confessionals. You see the big cross at the top. Look directly down below the cross and you see that scalloped area. There are crossed keys in that circle. Those are the keys like Peter is holding over here. They represent the keys that unlock or lock heaven. Christ said, whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. It's you either get in or you get out. They either open the doors for you or they lock you out of heaven. So that's why the symbol of the keys are there. Again, a symbol from Peter.